Features, serving customers for 64 years. Details at specsonline.com.
Warm today, 86 for the high, slight chances, some afternoon showers. Winds are going to be calm, 72 for the low tonight, upper 80s for the weekend. More clouds going in the next week as well. Then we're going to get into the 90s Monday and Tuesday, low 90s, but it's the 90s. 75 right now, Bush Airport, 73 here at the University of Houston. Listen anywhere. We're streaming live online at HoustonPublicMedia.org, on our app as well. Newsroom works hard to keep you updated 24/7. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. Houston Matters starts right now. Stick around, 9 o'clock.
The shakeup in leadership in Fort Bend County following the suspension of KP George as county judge has raised some eyebrows. I'm Michael Haggerty, filling in for Craig Cohen, and today on Houston Matters, we get an update on the county's newly appointed judge, his new chief of staff, and what the new roles mean for elections looming for them both.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, we discuss the reasons a recently planned conference on African spirituality never happened. And writer Yann Martel is coming to town next week to talk about his latest novel. The best-selling author of Life of Pi tells us about Son of Nobody and explains why he often loves to give starring roles in his books to animals. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7. And remember to check out our live video feed on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. We start with the news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is urging European countries to join the U.S. effort to open the Strait of Hormuz. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports it could take 6 months to clear the key waterway.
At a news conference, Hegseth repeated President Trump's threat to destroy any Iranian small boats laying mines in the narrow strait, through which about 20% of the world's oil passes.
We would welcome a serious European effort to do something about this strait and this passage, considering it's their energy capabilities that are most at stake.
But since oil is globally traded, the blockade is driving up prices worldwide. On Thursday, Trump said the U.S. is using minesweepers in the region, but there are no known U.S. minesweepers there. Hegseth dodged a question about Pentagon estimates that it could take 6 months to clear the strait. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
The White House says President Trump is issuing a 90-day extension of the Jones Act waiver to ease oil disruptions. President Trump has announced a 3-week extension to pause the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. But as NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reports from Beirut, both sides have continued to acknowledge attacks despite the agreement.
Hezbollah says it fired rockets into northern Israel Thursday night. The Israeli military says all were intercepted. That's after an Israeli airstrike killed prominent Lebanese journalist Amal Khalil while she was reporting in the south, the 8th journalist killed by Israel and Lebanon in the past 2 months. The Israeli military responded to Hezbollah's attack by carrying out several more airstrikes in the south on what it says were military structures. All of this occurred as the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors were in Washington to discuss the extension of the ceasefire. Iran-backed Hezbollah has been opposed to direct talks, while Iran insisted on a ceasefire in Lebanon to continue peace talks with the U.S. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Beirut.
Today, people in northern Oklahoma are assessing tornado damage. Multiple twisters touched down last night. The city of Enid was hit especially hard. It's about 100 miles north of Oklahoma City. There are no reports of deaths. The tech company Meta is laying off about 10% of its staff. NPR's John Ruich reports an internal memo says the company is reorganizing.
A Meta spokesperson confirmed the internal memo. In it, Meta's chief people officer Janelle Gale says the layoffs are part of a continued effort to run the company more efficiently. The cuts will also allow it to offset other investments the company is making. Gale says while it's unwelcome news that puts employees in an uneasy state, the company feels it's the best path forward given the circumstances. The layoffs will take place on May 20th. Meta also will not hire for 6,000 open roles that it had intended to fill. In January, Meta forecast record capital expenditures this year of up to $135 billion, almost double what it spent last year. John Ruich, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. The Houston Police Department has issued a new directive on how officers interact with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It enables officers to wait a, quote, reasonable amount of time for ICE to obtain custody of people with civil immigration warrants. Under a previous ordinance, officers were supposed to be prohibited from detaining people due to those warrants. But Mayor John Whitmire says the change allows city officials to recover $114 million in state public safety funding, which the governor had threatened to revoke unless HPD fully cooperated with ICE. Meanwhile, a protest is wrapping up right about now outside the Houston Police Department's headquarters. This after an HPD officer became the center of a racial bias investigation after posting a racist rant on social media. Officer Ashley Gonzalez was relieved of duty, and she's scheduled for a disciplinary meeting with HPD's chief and command staff today. Houston ISD School Board of Managers held their first budget workshop last night. State-appointed Superintendent Mike Miles outlined 9 priorities for the board to consider as it drafts the budget. The proposal aims to balance the budget this year.
We have to make tough choices. We cannot fund everything.
The list of priorities includes allocating nearly $5 million to implement Future 2 pilot schools, where students spend at least half the day building skills related to the rise of artificial intelligence. A second meeting to workshop the budget is scheduled for May 20th. The board will vote on the budget on June 11th. The Houston Texans beefed up their offensive line during the first round of last night's NFL draft. Commissioner Roger Goodell made the call.
With the 26th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select Keelan Rutledge, guard, Georgia Tech.
The Texans have 2 second-round picks as well as a third-round pick when the draft resumes later today. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty filling in for Craig Cohen today. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, the political reasons a recent conference on African spirituality never happened. Plus, we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week. And author Yann Martel talks about his latest novel and explains why he often likes giving starring roles in his stories to animals. But first, embattled politician K.P. George was suspended from his role as county judge following a civil suit filed by a resident who claimed her First Amendment rights were violated when George had her removed from a commissioner's court meeting. He was also convicted of felony money laundering in March. In the wake of his removal, 2 Republican nominees for elected offices have been placed in some high-ranking interim roles in Fort Bend County. Arrangements that some critics are calling unusual and that are already reshaping the political landscape heading into November. Melissa Enaje covers Fort Bend County for Houston Public Media and joins us now to break it all down. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning.
Happy Friday. K.P. George's removal from office came as a surprise, I guess, because of when it happened and why with the district judge's ruling. But given his many legal troubles, his days were likely numbered anyway. But, I mean, what was surprising was that the appointment of someone running for that very office who has never held that office. What can you tell us about Daniel Wong, who is now the interim Fort Bend County judge, and what has been the reaction of commissioners and other elected officials to his appointment?
Yeah, you said the word surprising, and I think that's a key word I'd like to take out at this moment. You know, the moment when that civil suit was ruled and the district judge ruled to appoint Daniel Wong. Essentially, according to first reports, Wong was actually surprised that he was the appointed person. And the litigator who filed that suit, she was actually unaware of even who Wong was. So essentially, in the 60 hours from when Wong was appointed to actually being swearing in, he just had essentially 60 hours to appoint the people in his party and as well as his chief of staff. But in that same sense, Wong isn't a stranger to the Fort Bend County community. He served in the early 2000s as a at-large council member in the city of Sugar Land, and he's also the owner of a private civil engineering firm. And so he's been serving as not only as a businessman and a former elected official in the city of Sugar Land, but he's also on a couple boards in the industry. So familiar face in that sense. But as far as a county position, this is the first time with this appointment.
What have political and legal observers said about this appointment, given that there could be, at least an appearance of this giving a candidate a leg up in a tight race?
Yeah, the political experts that I've spoken to, they've all said that Wong's appointment all falls in line with the strict rules of the Texas election code. That being said, I'm told that, the appointment was still a decisive political calculation with a partisan judge appointing the Republican nominee, essentially running for the county judge position in the fall to serve. It puts Wong in this position where he's in front of voters for the months leading up to the election in the fall. And some may feel that legal experts have told me that, hey, he's been running the county pretty well. It just makes sense to just vote him in again in the fall. But that's, up to what the voters will actually cast their ballots in the fall.
Judge Wong presided over his first commissioner's court meeting this week. Was there any protest or comment about his appointment?
Yeah, actually, he presided over his first commissioner's court yesterday, and there was a planned Democratic rally from the Fort Bend County Democratic Party outside of court. And so there were signs, Wong is wrong. And, they had residents who were just in opposition to Wong's appointment. And essentially, when I've spoken to them, they just said that, they're opposed to this decision. And we're just hoping if Wong was a man of character, he wouldn't have accepted the position and would have just waited to see what voters would have said in the fall. At that rally was also the Democratic nominee for Texas's 22nd congressional district, and that is she's running opposed to Trevor Nels, who is actually the Republican nominee for that position. So she was there to oppose that as well.
Yeah, Trevor Nels was named Chief of Staff for interim Judge Wong, so that's an interesting wrinkle in this. How unusual is his appointment into that position?
Yeah, I've spoken to Craig Goodman, a political science professor at Texas A&M in Victoria, and he called it unusual because this is someone who's seeking a congressional seat while also having to kind of introduce himself to a bunch of voters, while also taking on this high-profile county responsibility. While he's not public-facing in the sense that he's chief of staff, he's kind of in the background, dealing with policies or dealing with anything that may, come before Wong. So it's very much, like I've been told, unusual, but again, all along the same lines of the Texas election code.
The political experts, they feel like this is putting a finger on the scale a little bit for these upcoming elections, for Wong, who's running, for that seat, and also for Nels, who's running for that congressional seat.
Yeah, I've been told that not only is it for, a higher visibility for both of them, especially leading up to November with, Wong presiding over Commissioner Court. And if things go well, if they see that, things are running smoothly, it very much positions him essentially for what voters may think coming in the fall. But not only for Wong and Nels, but essentially the Republican Party as a whole. We had a partisan judge who appointed Wong, and Wong also in his interim position appointed someone who's also an active Republican nominee. So how that will play out, we'll have to see in the fall, but very much influence.
Yeah, interesting. Back to KP George. He still has a misdemeanor trial pending. Then there's the sentencing on that money laundering conviction that is scheduled for June, where George faces up to 10 years in prison. But commissioners had a vote yesterday to continue paying his salary. Can you explain what's going on there? Yeah,
it was actually an agenda item that Precinct 4 Commissioner Dexter McCoy brought up for discussion. And we learned that it was over $52,000 to pay for George's salary until his June sentencing. And with when that was brought up and they got more clarification, commissioners still voted 4-1 with McCoy casting the dissenting vote that we should just pay George. And in the sense of, why it's not just something protocol, it's essentially what I've been told from legal experts is that going into litigation over this isn't worth the time or the money. There's already a litany of litigation going on for George. So this is what I'm being told, a small price to pay instead of having to go to the court to contest paying George.
Speaking of that litigation, I mean, is there any further legal blowback that could still affect the county as Georgia's legal cases continue to play out?
Yeah, well, in terms of George, right, because Wong's time serving an interim county judge is all dependent on George's suspension. And at any moment, George can resign. He can, no longer serve as the county judge. Again, there's a county judge and an interim, essentially two judges at the moment. But until that happens, Wong will still serve. But if at any time George decides to resign, Wong will no longer serve, and that replacement will fall under commissioner's court, and that will go under, two Republican commissioners and two Democratic commissioners, with one of the commissioners, McCoy, actually going to the May runoffs for the county judge position. So I don't see him necessarily voting for his opposition as Wong to be a replacement.
Interesting. So there could be another interim chosen if potentially how this plays out. Fort Bend is one of the fastest growing and most diverse counties in Texas. What are residents and community leaders telling you about how they feel watching all this play out?
Yeah, well, for those that I've spoken to or heard at Commissioner's Court, or the voters that I've spoken to thus far, they are passionate about their community because they care about their community. They care about Fort Bend County, and they just kind of want to move forward from all these scandals. They want to bring back, transparency in their county, civility, and they're hoping that, after all this tumultuous time, whether it's the May runoffs or leading into the fall elections and the midterms, they're hoping that their voices will be heard there. But they're definitely, wanting change, transparency, and to move forward.
Melissa Enaje covers Fort Bend County for Houston Public Media. Thanks for explaining all this to us.
Thanks for talking.
Just ahead, the reasons why a recent conference on African spirituality never happened and what that says about the current climate. As Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Hello, I'm Nikki Beatty. Join me.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
And from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Novotny and Company, offering commercial and residential property tax protests for 39 years. The deadline to file a protest is May 15th. Info and online filing at novotnycompany.com.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty, in today for Craig Cohen. Houston, of course, as we often hear, is one of the most diverse cities in the country. And that diversity often shows up in the way culture, history, and spirituality intersect. That's exactly what the planned International Pan-African Spirituality Conference set out to explore. According to organizers, the event was designed as a global gathering bringing together scholars, practitioners, and community members to honor and reclaim the spiritual traditions of Africa and the African diaspora, while also challenging long-standing misconceptions and connecting people across borders. Houston Matters actually planned to be at the conference. Our producer, Laura Walker, went out last weekend to cover it, but when she arrived, there was no conference happening. That's because the event was canceled after several international participants were unable to secure funding from their home countries to travel to the United States. So what does that say about this moment and how politics, economics, and global relationships are shaping who gets to participate in cultural exchange? We're joined now by Dr. Lindsay Gary, who's an author and the founder of that Pan-African Spirituality Conference, to talk about what happened, what it means moving forward, and more. Dr. Gary, welcome to Houston Matters.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on today.
When you made the decision to cancel the conference, what specifically had changed in the political or economic landscape that made this unworkable?
So initially, the conference was really designed to gather people internationally, as you stated, to make sure that there was really a global exchange of ideas around African spirituality. So people coming from the continent of Africa, but also, various parts of the African diaspora. And this idea came to me a few years ago. I had no idea what the political climate would look like, both domestically and internationally. And so a number of our speakers, actually the majority of our speakers, are people coming from universities. And so some of them are coming from history departments, dance departments, even Black studies departments. And because of the decline in funding domestically, because of our political situation, a lot of people were not actually able to obtain the funding, or were having a lot of delays in obtaining that funding, which really inadvertently kept them from coming to the conference. And then internationally, people weren't able to get their visas in places like Brazil. We had speakers coming from Brazil as well as from South Africa. So really, out of all of the people we had gathering in terms of panelists and speakers, only about 3 of those were coming from the Gulf Coast area. And so this was really international, and so it was really impacted directly this year. And this would have been our first year doing the conference.
Yeah, it was. It's called the International Pan-African Spirituality Conference. So and it makes sense that they'd be coming from across the world. That's a big part of the appeal. And so it was political and economic reasons behind this. What did some of them say directly to you? What kind of feedback did you get from them about this situation?
Yeah, so more specifically, people were just saying, hey, I need this letter, I need that. All of these different types of documentation that in the past you would have just needed a letter that they could have brought to their departments and saying, hey, we were accepted into this conference, can you fund it? But then when you take it to an office to get a visa, they're rejecting it or saying you have to pay these astronomical kinds of fees to actually get the visa. So it really made it almost impossible to obtain. And then domestically speaking, you really just have delays, people asking for additional documentation, maybe giving you approval, but not giving you the funding up front. Maybe it's a reimbursement, or maybe it's only part of the conference that will be reimbursed. So not a lot of support in making sure it happened. And so a lot of people were basically trying to come out of pocket, to travel. And it's different if you're driving from Louisiana, but if you're coming from Indiana or New York, California even, it makes it very difficult to actually get to Houston. So, you have to wonder if the conference wasn't what it was, if there would have been more likely to fund it. But also, when you look at these individual departments, they're being directly hit. And even some campuses have completely paused funding on, for example, Black studies departments, and even using that funding for travel is, the last of the barrel. So it's really, it's unfortunate. It was unexpected in a large way.
So given what you're saying, you feel like this is not just an isolated incident, part of a maybe broader trend affecting global gatherings like this?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a broader trend. I think anybody who's doing something that's uplifting Black communities or diverse communities, if you will probably have this type of challenge. And I think even had it been local, it would have still been the same challenge. I've seen it with other conferences. And then when you add in the international aspects of it, and you have people coming from outside who are coming for this type of conference, you're gonna see that. And I've seen it across the board. And as an academic, I've seen it with other conferences being impacted in the same way. A lot of them have been canceled, postponed, have had their numbers decreased. I'm on the board for another organization that's an international conference, and a very similar situation has been occurring. So people have been opting to, try to make things virtual, but, a lot of people don't want to do things virtually. They had to do things virtually, at the height of the COVID pandemic. And so it really kind of defeats the purpose in a lot of ways of that the connection that these gatherings actually bring when they're in person. So it just makes it really tricky to navigate in our economic and political situation here in this country.
Yeah, there's a different energy and excitement when you're doing an in-person gathering, especially if you're bringing people from far away together who are rarely together. That changes the dynamic of an event like this. So obviously, when you're putting together an event like this, and you said you're involved in other conferences and aware of other conferences, how important is it in selecting, representation, who gets to participate when you're having a conversation about any given topic, that it's represented by people who are, living it or represent those communities themselves?
It's imperative. So this conference in particular is very unique. I know a lot of people who found conferences will say that to justify it, but no, genuinely speaking, because African spirituality is a huge taboo. It's a huge taboo in many Black communities, even beyond Black communities. So when you think about making this an international thing and bringing people from different countries, it's imperative to have those different perspectives. We have different spiritual traditions, but they may have not been talked about on an academic level, right? It's more so on, hey, this is what we practice here in our community, but bringing people together who are not only practitioners of different traditions, but actually scholars who've done research, who can help elevate these topics and really dispel the myths around it, because there's so many myths. There's so much anti-African spirituality rhetoric in our media and our educational systems. So people who could really have the power to share and converge and then take this out into other communities, their larger communities, this would have been a really powerful moment to do that. And so we needed to have representation from people from all over the world to be able to share and connect. And, it defeats the purpose if we can't do it, if we can't get together and do just that. So even thinking about the people who were going to be in attendance, who weren't necessarily presenting, a lot of them were coming from Houston and the surrounding areas, but they were coming from so many different walks of life and countries of origin. So it really would have been a place that would be uniquely crafted. And Houston being, as we said earlier, the most diverse city in the country, in my opinion, was the perfect place to hold a meeting like this. So we're hopeful that next year, we don't know what the political situation will be like, if it'll be much different. But we're hoping that we can kind of strategize in advance potential obstacles that arise and come up with different alternatives if we need to, but to really push forward and make sure that this conference happens.
You mentioned it being taboo subject, African spirituality. I know that destigmatizing that was part of the mission of this conference. Why is it taboo, do you think?
Ooh, we could have a whole.
Let's have a conference right now, right? Let's have a mini conference.
And it being our first conference, I was looking forward. I was going to actually have my own address as the founder, but there are many reasons. I think a lot of the reasons is because, Western Eurocentric societies have kind of condemned things that are Black, right? And historically speaking, right, since colonization and enslavement. And I always say that African spirituality and religion is the last frontier. Many of our people who are, from the African diaspora are actually able to recognize anti-Blackness in other ways. But when it comes to religion and spirituality, the colonization has been so deep. And it's something that's so personal, so personal to people that it's very hard for them to overcome it. Anything that has been that is African spirituality is seen as negative. If you turn on any movie, think about how they demonize people who practice, non-Western or Abrahamic religions. You see it all over, so much to the point where you don't even recognize that it's happening. You can see it in, even in Disney movies, right? You can see it in any TV show you turn on. It's like, why is that such a bad thing? And I think people historically have been afraid of the power that African people have if they're really immersed in their own culture down to their spiritual practices. And for that reason have worked to demonize it, over the centuries. And so over time, people are like, ooh, I don't want to be associated with that. I'll take everything else about being my authentic, African diasporic Black self, except the spiritual part. And regardless of people, I always say, regardless of people's spiritual beliefs, and religious beliefs, just being able to discuss it, being able to have dialogue about it is important. And that even is very difficult, I've noticed in many circles. So the conference was a way for people to, come in a safe space to learn and ask the questions they want to ask and learn from experts and people who've lived these lives and experiences without, maybe feeling afraid to ask those questions, because many people are afraid to even tap into it. Oh, it's a bad thing, So yeah, I was looking forward to that.
So no,
many of us were.
Yeah, I know you're trying to. You said you're planning to try again to host another international Pan-African Spiritual Conference. Dr. Lindsay Gary is an author and founder of that conference. Dr. Gary, thanks for taking time to talk with us about all this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Still to come, our non-experts break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week's news. As Houston Matters continues here on News 88.7 and on YouTube.
Support comes from DePelchin.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Beautiful, the Carole King story. Feel the earth move as you sing along to the story of the legendary songstress. On stage at the Hobby Center May 19th through 31st. Tickets available at tuts.org.
From Pearland, a community dedicated to growing innovative businesses and inspiring families, offering diverse workforce, modern infrastructure, schools, parks, and more. Details PearlandEDC.com. Pearland innovation lives here. East Loop at I-10 working an overturned 18-wheeler. Pretty heavy delays.
A lot can happen in a week, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it downright ugly. When facing intriguing developments in the week's news, we turn to a rotating panel of non-experts to parse the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. On this panel today with us is Marcus Davis, owner of the Breakfast Klub restaurants, Vivian Ho, a health economist for Rice University and Baylor College of Medicine, and David Branham, a professor of political science at the University of Houston downtown. Marcus, Vivian, David, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Panel officials with ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, says the state's energy demand could reach nearly 368 gigawatts by 2032. That's enough energy to power more than 73 million homes on a hot summer day or cold winter morning. It's also more than 4 times the state's record demand. So why the huge number? Well, as Houston Public Media's Natalie Weber reported this week, turns out ERCOT is using a new process this year to forecast energy demand, using responses from utility companies to predict medium and large energy users like data centers, which want to join the Texas power grid. As a result, grid operators are telling the Public Utility Commission that ERCOT's forecast is likely an overestimate. In response, ERCOT's considering revising that. ERCOT forecasts energy demand in 6 years at 4 times the state's highest ever demand, but may now revise that figure. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Marcus, I'll start with you.
It is confusing and concerning all at the same time. Confusing because, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. When you look at, I was just having a conversation with someone about the data centers and the amount of energy they're going to require and how they're going to have an impact on society. And so when we don't know how many we're going to have and when we're going to have them and where they're going to be, and we don't know the certainty of our grid in the state of Texas, that's concerning. And then when ERCOT produces numbers based on an old system or a new system, and then somebody says, hey, your numbers are wrong, well, let me go back and play with my numbers again and see what I come up with. So this is very confusing and concerning, and I think it's in the best interest of the state of Texas and its citizenry that we get this right, especially considering This is a life or death situation. We've had some serious issues with our grid in the past, and we shouldn't be willing to be willy-nilly with the numbers in the future.
Good, bad, or ugly, Vivian?
Yeah, I agree with Marcus in terms of this is a really distressing situation, and given what's happened to us with Winter Storm Uri in the past, I'm trying to give some sort of grace to the ERCOT folks. I mean, they're trying. I don't know what our electricity demand is going to be. Certainly, this news station and others have done excellent reporting showing that these data centers are just going to consume a tremendous amount of energy. But there's a lot of uncertainty about whether that data center enthusiasm is going to continue. They've said this is on the high end. So, ERCOT is just trying to control and make supply equal to demand. I think it's more a question of what is, the public utility company of Texas going to do about this, and are they going to plan appropriately, and most importantly, make sure that those costs don't go on to us, the consumers, they go on to the users of those data centers instead.
David?
I think it's good that we're thinking about this now, because we've seen what happened in the past when government doesn't do their job and they don't administrate the area like they need to. Corpus Christi is a great example where the water supply is very low because they invited a lot of industry in that they didn't have the resources to cover. So the government has to take care of this situation, and they need to get on it now and make sure that they have provisions, because like Marcus said, this is life or death for the residents. So the residents have to have the electricity. We all of a sudden have this incredible technology that everybody seems to want to embrace that's going to take up a whole lot more energy than we currently have. So we have to do something now. And so it's up to the state legislatures and the governor to get involved and make sure that any resources that are needed for data centers that are going up are provided. And we also have to make sure that the externalities are not going to overtake the communities. We have to make sure that there's not too much noise for people who live in the area and so forth. So it's a big job, and what's good about this is that we're taking care of it now and looking at it now and ready to react.
Panel, the annual White House Correspondents Dinner is tomorrow night in Washington. It's a longstanding annual tradition that brings together the White House press corps and political figures that they cover, but this year's event will buck decades of tradition with its headlining speaker, not a comedian ready to roast attendees. No, it's a mentalist, Oz Perlman, who's known for mind reading, pin guessing tricks, and a third-place finish on America's Got Talent in 2015. Perlman says his job is to bring us together, that attendees don't necessarily agree on how the country's being governed or the war or economy or a million different things, but that for 25 minutes they're going to laugh, applaud, and have their jaws drop. The White House Correspondents Dinner will feature a mentalist instead of a comedian this year. Is that good, bad, or ugly? Vivian, we'll start with you.
Oh, this is so ugly. So the White House Correspondents Dinner, if you look on their website and see what they are about, they're promoting protection of the First Amendment, free speech, making sure that we get accurate information from the White House. And I heard the story on Morning Edition this morning about what Oz Perlman said about what he's supposed to do. He says his mission for this event is that he wants everyone to come out of the event happy, to bring us all together. And, and the president is going to be there. So it means also that President Trump is going to come out happy. And I'm just kind of like, when I want that kind of feeling, that's what I go to church for. But if this organization says their mission is about free speech, then I'm sorry, that's not what this dinner is about. And for come on, he hasn't come for the last few years because he just can't take a joke. This is supposed to be about being able to, have some humor about what you're doing. And then also that these mentalists, they admit that they're not truly reading your mind, that they're actually sort of making it look as though they can read their mind. I just think this is going to be like something, just think, like Bill Maher on Real Time is going to come up with this list of things that could come out of his head. I'm going to read your mind. It's like, the Strait of Hormuz is open and everything is fine. I mean, those are the types of things that would come out. It's just, we've had enough of hallucinations and acting as if we can read people's minds, and I'm not looking forward to it.
Trying to get everyone to leave an event feeling good or feeling the same way, that's a tall order. David, good, bad, or ugly?
I don't know. What I'm ready to do is sit back and watch and see what happens. This correspondence dinner is often, it's looked on by the public as something that's entertainment, and what you end up getting is controversy if there's any controversy in it, it gets played over and over and over again. I remember when President Obama was there, that if he said something that was a joke that was maybe not taken so well, that it was played over and over and over again. And so, what Vivian's talking about, where the president is unable to take a joke, yeah, that's kind of the personality he has. So I'm going to sit back and see what's going on here. I don't think the consequences are that high. I mean, we have a First Amendment, and it's clearly the case that the American press can report freely in this country, and they've been able to do it. Unlike any other country, they've been able to freely report what they want. It's really changed over the last few decades, where it's become much more partisan and much more along those lines. So with everybody coming out feeling good, I think that's kind of a tall, that may even be a joke that he's talking about here. I don't know. So I'm ready to sit back and watch and see what happens.
Perlman knew that's what you were going to do. Sorry. Marcus, good, bad, or ugly?
Eerie. It seems a little eerie to me. I used to watch the television show, The Mentalist. I don't do a lot of television, so I pick like one show per whatever that I'll watch. And that was a show that I will watch regularly. And so when I saw this, I said, I really don't know what a mentalist is. Let me look up what a mentalist is. Here's what's interesting. A mentalist is a performing artist who uses psychological techniques, suggestion, persuasion, and illusion to create the appearance of supernatural mental abilities. That sounds like the president. Is the president a mentalist? So the mentalist picked a mentalist to be the headliner at the White House Correspondents Dinner. I don't know. This is mental to me.
I'll leave it there for everyone to interpret their own way. Panel will conclude with this. When the LPGA Women's Golf Tour moved its first major of the year from Mission Hills Golf Course in California to Memorial Park here in Houston, it had to part with one Chevron Championship tradition. The winner leaping into Mission Hills' Poppie's Pond that surrounds the 18th green. Well, golfers and organizers missed that tradition, so Memorial Park is accommodating with a new water feature, a pool that's just 15 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 4 feet deep, and located just right off the 18th green. So the winner of this weekend's tournament will once again get a chance to jump into the water, but better do so carefully. It's only 4 feet deep. It's not a very big pool. It's also temporary. Memorial Park plans to place more significant water along the right side of the redesigned 18th hole next year, which should accommodate a more dramatic leap from Poppie's Pond to a temporary pool. Is this good, bad, or ugly? David, I'll start with you, the man wearing a Mark Norman golf shirt.
I am, and I am in my sixth decade of golfing, so I love the sport. This is, to me, good. I've been watching women's golf for a long time. When it was at Mission Hills, it got to the point where that golf course was what golfers call a goat ranch. It wasn't even playable half the time. So I'm so glad they decided to change their venues, because in golf, the venue matters, and the LPGA deserves good venues because it's a really wonderful product. So they moved it to Carlton Woods up north in the Woodlands, and the pond was basically this big lake that they were jumping into. And I remember one Sunday it was really cold, and so the winner had to jump in and basically get them out and warm them up as soon as they get done. So now with the move to Memorial Park, what they're saying is that Memorial Park is one of the best golf facilities that we have in this country, and that it's deserving of a major championship for the LPGA. And what they're doing, the one hole that they really kind of need to redesign is number 18. So this goes into part of that redesign, and it'll be a great new home for them. So it's good. It's really good.
I meant Greg Norman, not Mark Norman. Sorry. Mark Norman's a comedian. Marcus, real quick, your thoughts on this?
I'm not a golfer, so I don't know. But I did wonder, why did we have to create the new? I mean, doesn't Buffalo Bayou run along Memorial Park? Why?
But it's going to be close to the 18th green.
I mean,
and when it was at Mission Hills, people actually got injured jumping into Poppie's Pond. So
then, I mean, come on now. If we want to get the most out of the city, use Memorial Park and use Buffalo Bayou. I mean, I'm certain that they'd be anxious to jump into Buffalo Bayou with all the good stuff that's floating around.
Vivian, I have my doubts.
Hey, thanks for teaching me so much because I'm not a golfer either, so I appreciate that. Let's get into this. Let's call this pool like the Bayou Bathtub or the Memorial Park Cold Plunge. Or, Chevron's the sponsor.
Yeah.
How about the Chevron Splashdown? Combine our NASA interest. Go for it.
Let's do it. I mean, Memorial Park is now a great golf venue, and it's really good for the city. So.
I think if they jumped in Buffalo Bayou, that would be Memorial.
That's right. Memorable and in memoriam.
Maybe a
possibly.
Slow memorial, but yeah.
Marcus Davis is the owner of the Breakfast Klub restaurant. Vivian Ho is a health economist for Rice and Baylor College of Medicine. David Branham is a political science professor at UH downtown. Marcus, Vivian, David, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Houston Public Media in partnership with...
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Foods, a Texas retailer offering wine, spirits, and finer foods, plus recipes and seasonal features, serving customers for 64 years. Details at specsonline.com.
Support comes from Metro. World Cup planning includes transit improvements intended to serve Houston after the final match. Metro provides bus, rail, and paratransit service and continues mobility enhancements across the region. More at ridemetro.org/Metro Now.
Writer Yann Martel is coming to Houston on Monday evening to discuss his latest novel. It's called Son of Nobody, which is described as a retelling of the Trojan War through the eyes of an everyday soldier. And it simultaneously sheds light on the life struggles of the modern-day researcher who's uncovering this lost ancient epic poem that retells the soldier's story. I spoke with Martel earlier this week about that book and about the novel he's best known for, the Booker Prize-winning bestseller Life of Pi, where a young boy is lost at sea on a lifeboat with a Bengal tiger from his family's zoo. That story is just one of many, where Martel gives starring roles to animals, and I asked him why.
Well, in part, they're underused in adult fiction. We're used to animals in children's literature, but they're rarely used with serious intent in adult novels, and I'm not sure why, in the sense that there's nothing particularly childlike about an animal. They are fellow denizens of this planet, and just on a purely technical level, I find animals are very good storytelling vehicles because we tend to be very cynical about ourselves as a species, but a lot less cynical about animals, especially wild animals. Domesticated animals, we have our strong opinions. Some people are dog people, some people are cat people, but you rarely have people who are not, giraffe people or rhinoceros people. We find animals, especially those, as the zoo trade says, charismatic megafauna. We find them very impressive, and therefore initially right away your suspicion is suspended if a story features some kind of wild animal. So it's just a good storytelling vehicle that can really be freighted with a lot of symbolism.
And it opens up a whole other world, rest of the world, really, when it comes to potential characters, right?
Exactly. There's a lot of animals out there.
There are a lot of animals and zoology in Life of Pi that many people know you for. For those who haven't read it or seen the film, there's a young man lost at sea. He's stuck in a lifeboat with one of his family's zoo animals, a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. I've read that fans over the years have had a wide array of interpretations of the tiger, metaphors they see him as. What are some of the things you've heard from people over the years? What stood out to you?
Well, that's what's interesting is you write a book with one intent. After all, you're a book's first reader, and so you see certain things. But then readers take it on and turn it their own. I mean, a book, in a sense, any work of art is a co-creation. You bring something to it, which is why art can be so powerful, because in a sense, you're creating it yourself, which makes it a very powerful experience. But what I've mostly found with people with the Life of Pi is the tiger takes on some evil thing or something they're wrestling with, whether it's cancer or a kidnapper, literally someone who's kidnapped someone. Yeah, a variety, or their ungrateful husband. I've heard a variety. Commonly it was a disease. Someone has some disease they have to try to vanquish, and they see it as a tiger in a lifeboat, and they have to somehow live with it, and so that's the most common one. But I've said more random ones. I said one poor soul who had been kidnapped by a taxi driver in Belize, and then I remember one in Switzerland, a woman who was commenting that it sounded like the tiger, Pi has to look after the tiger, feed the tiger, and he leaves without saying goodbye. She asked, this is a metaphor on marriage. So yeah, it's interesting the way people will take on my metaphor and make it their own.
Is it exciting, interesting, maybe ever scary at all you create a novel, you create a piece of art, and you let it loose into the world, and people take it and run with it, think it is something else, see it in ways that you can't control? Is that exciting, interesting, or is ever a little nerve-wracking?
Oh, all of the above. I mean, it is the nature of art. As I said, you have to make art personal, otherwise it won't work for you. In fact, that's the very nature. That's the similarity between art and gods. Every religion will say of its god that it loves you. In the same thing with the work of art. It necessarily has to love you, otherwise it won't speak to you. So you take it on as something very personal and therefore very powerful. So that's inherent in art, that you have to let go and let it become something for someone else. Now, if you ever hear someone who has a radically unpleasant or strange reading, that's a bit disheartening. To be honest, I've never heard that of mine. People sometimes take it further than I intended, seeing little symbols where I didn't, but rarely in a way that seems untoward. And the same thing with this latest one, Son of Nobody, about the Trojan War. People will take some of the metaphors and make it their own, but usually in a way that I can vaguely see where they're coming from. They're just taking it further than I would have thought it out, which is totally fine. After all, in a sense, I'm the architect of the building. How you see the building is up to you. I've obviously set it up with a certain aesthetic and a certain philosophy in mind. Your reaction to it is yours. But after all, I had a certain intent. It'd be surprising if someone had the exact opposite intent in taking it in. But I said that's the risk of art. Art is a gift. You give it, and the world takes it as it wants to take it.
You mentioned your latest novel, Son of Nobody. In it, a researcher unearths fragments of this long-lost epic poem that retells the story of the Trojan War from a very different perspective than Homer told it, not from the vantage point of gods or warriors. Who is telling this version he uncovers?
In this case, it's a commoner. It's an ordinary soldier. In the Iliad, as you pointed out, everyone who speaks with one exception is either a god or some sort of blue blood, a king or a queen or a noble person. There's only one exception, a commoner named Thersites in Book 2 speaks, and he rails against Agamemnon, the supreme commander of the Greek forces, saying, why are we here? What do we have to get from this? Which, from the point of view of a modern reader, makes total sense. Why would a foot soldier spend 10 years at Troy to get basically nothing, while Agamemnon gets all the treasury, all the girls, everything, all the glory and everything? And to me, it struck me as a nice perspective to take today. We are lorded over by elites that sometimes very obviously care very little for us, want to exploit us. The American middle class is kind of shrinking, and there's this class of multi-millionaires and billionaires. Well, they're doing us no good. You obviously want to incentivize people to do well, and the idea of getting wealthy is a strong imperative, is a strong incentive, but too much wealth does no one any good. Frankly, too much wealth, I think, perverts a soul, makes you lose your sense of values, but it's not good for society to have that much wealth accruing in a small number of people. So in Son of Nobody, I took the perspective of a commoner, because that seemed natural to me. I'm the average middle-class son of a Canadian family, middle-class family. You can't do it alone. There's a perception when you're rich that you can. It's kind of an illusion, but nonetheless, we do live in a society, and that's the very fabric of who we are. We're social animals, so it can't be distorted too much. So that's one of the elements, yes, a sort of a call for egalitarianism, that we do better when we're not so distant from each other in any kind of way, whether it's wealth, prestige, or whatever. After all, our fates are all similar. You're born and you die, and you have numbers in between. Wealth doesn't give you any greater immortality than, having less money.
All along the way through the book, readers are encountering pieces of this long-lost epic poem. While they're doing so, we get to see these reflections of this researcher who's prompted by the way, he's the one who uncovers this, but he's prompted by what he finds to kind of reflect on the things going on in his life, the drama in his marriage and his home life. It might have been plenty enough of its own. It might have been plenty on its own to try and relate this new telling of the Iliad, the Trojan War, and its characters all by itself. But why did you want to, set those two narrative lines side by side, and how do they kind of play off each other?
Yeah, you're right. The novel's set in quite an unusual way. The top of the page, the page is radically divided in two by a black line, and in the top half, you will have fragments of this lost Trojan War epic called the Soat, and in the bottom half, you have footnotes. I delighted in giving a starring role to footnotes. At one point, I say in the book, we're all footnotes to a greater story. Every American citizen, feels like a tiny little footnote living here, there, anywhere in the U.S., but collectively, the American people, all those 300 million footnotes, in fact, make up the American epic at the top of the page. So I like this idea of something old being in dialogue with something present. So the top of the page is the past, this Greek fragment, these fragments from this lost Greek epic. The bottom of the page are these modern footnotes. And I wanted to set up a parallel. I wanted to set up a parallel between this mythical war, the Trojan War, and the life of one individual. I wanted to personalize this great war into that of a small character, because after all, we live individual lives. And so I wanted a kind of war that would be realistic to people. Very few of us have been in active war. I mean, of course, there's veterans, but most of us haven't been veterans of wars. So I wanted a war that we also can relate to. And I thought the war of a relationship falling apart, a husband and wife falling apart, that terribleness that can be, that struck me as a proper parallel, because after all, there's no point looking in the past if it's not somehow to illuminate the present. So I want to put these on a parallel track, this mythical war and this contemporary war, to sort of draw parallels. And what do you do with it? Because that's one thing that's unusual about the Iliad that inspired me for this, Homer's Iliad, is the deep note of despair. It is genuinely a Greek tragedy, and it's particularly despair in that there's no redemption. All these people are angry at each other. The first word of the Iliad is menim, which means wrath, rage. And it is really all about anger and its destructiveness. And this is something that we still live today. There's so much anger going around. And one of the questions I ask is, what do we do with this? What did the Greeks do with it? Well, they did very little. They were just consumed by it. And I was interested by this other foundational story of the West. I also weave that in the story, is the story of Jesus of Nazareth, who lived in an equally rough time where, life was short and could be brutal, and so could be just as despairing. But it's interesting how the emotional note struck by the story of Jesus is radically opposite. If the first word of the Iliad is menim, wrath, we would all agree, regardless of whether Christians or not, that the key word of the Gospels would be love. So I just thought it was very curious. These two foundational stories of the West have radically different emotions, wrath, love. And so to me, they're like the 2 feet we walk on, the left and the right, wrath, love, wrath, love. And in the Iliad, you get a lot of wrath, and in the Gospels, you get a lot of love. And those are the 2 necessary feet. You don't want to entirely eliminate anger. Righteous anger is the first step, the first emotion you need to change things. You can't just sit with that anger. If you stew on it too long, if you go postal, your rage has gone to nothing. You have to sort of use it to then step with that next foot, the foot of love.
Yann Martel is the author of numerous books, including the Booker Prize-winning bestseller Life of Pi. He'll discuss his latest, Son of Nobody, in an event with Imprint Houston Monday night. We have a link to more information at houstonmatters.org. Well, that does it for another hour of Houston Matters. On Monday's show, we'll talk about the state's increased engagement in local public schools and get an update on the Rockets playoff series. I'm Michael Haggerty. Craig's back on Monday. Have a great weekend and join us then for those and other Houston Matters.
Support comes from West Chase District, serving businesses with office options, regional connectivity, amenity investments, and talent pool access within a managed business and residential hub in Houston. More on how West Chase works at westchasedistrict.com.
From Baylor College.